Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to a brand new video. So in this video I thought I could focus it mainly around Avery's G-tube. So what I do to care for it, to keep it clean, maintenance, and just all things G-tube in general. Now I didn't intend on filming this video today. It's been a little bit of a mess up today, and if you've seen the vlog, which I think will probably go up after this maybe, so if that's the case, you obviously wouldn't have seen it yet, but in the next vlog. We had some snow this morning, so Josh ended up coming home from work just in case it got bad. We live on a hill that would be quite dangerous if it got icy and slippery, but it then stopped when he got home, and then it started to thaw, and the excitement was over and he had to go back to work. So I wasn't going to film this video today. I had planned to, but then I wasn't going to because Josh was coming home. But now he's gone again, so I figured I would just film it anyway. So it's currently 20 to 11, so I'm starting a little bit later than I would have intended to. I would normally clean Avery's G-tube button first thing in the morning, but I haven't done it yet, and this is something that I do every day, twice a day. I will clean her stoma site and I will put on a new button cover. So I keep all of Avery's little button covers in this little pot here. It just keeps them clear of collecting any dust or grossness. And the reason I do it twice a day, because originally the community nurses said we only needed to clean it once a day. I do it twice because these are fabric, and my theory is fabric will harvest a little bit more bacteria than single-use pads that we used to use when Avery first got her G-tube. So I like to clean and change this twice a day. So this little one has Elsa on it. My brother's fiance actually bought these ones for Avery. They're really, really cute. And I will just use a cotton pad. Again, we keep cotton pads in this little pot just to keep them free from dust. I keep them in the bathroom because I use them too for like toner and stuff on my face. But these are perfect for cleaning Avery's G-tube. So like I said, cleaning Avery's G-tube and her stoma site is something I do religiously every single day, twice a day without fail. However, today is going to be a little bit different because Avery is actually due an entire button change. So I think I'm gonna get that done today. Now is probably the perfect time because her last feed was around 8 o'clock and it's now almost 11, so her food should have settled just enough. She is fed 4 hourly, so I have those kind of windows in between that I can do this. We swap out Avery's G-tube about every 3 or so months. That was what was recommended to us by the community nurses, so that is what we do. Luckily both Josh and I have been trained up to do it, so either one of us can change her button. I basically just call the community nurses and order a button and then I change it. To be honest, I do always make sure I have a spare, so if I know that I'm going to be changing it soon, I will order another one so that I can use one to change, and then I will always have a spare just in case we have any accidents or mishaps with the G-tube and we need a new one immediately. So I'm going to get all of the bits together to change Avery's G-tube, but first I am going to sanitize my hands. Obviously hand hygiene is important anyway, but especially when we're doing anything with Avery's feed or G-tube, but even more so when we're actually going to be changing Avery's G-tube or changing out the water in her button. That is something I'll get to in a minute. I always make sure my hands are clean and they are doused in hand sanitizer. Even though the stomach is not a sterile environment, I don't want to pass on any bugs or viruses that may be on my hands directly into her stomach, because that's just a recipe for her getting ill, and we all know what happens when Avery gets ill. So my hands are nice and clean. I am going to get everything together. But for now, I'm just going to keep this in a Tupperware container. The next thing I need is some sterile water or cool boiled water. So I've just popped some in this little bottle. This is what I use to clean Avery's G-tube anyway. When I do it twice a day, I will just use a cotton pad and cool boiled water to clean it. But this also acts as lubricant for the G-tube. Some people do use actual lubricants like certain jellies and whatnot. We've always been told by Avery's nurses just to use cool boiled water. It works just fine, and it always has for us. This is Avery's fresh button. So Avery has the mini balloon button and she has the 12 French in the 1.5 centimeter. So the French is the thickness of the tube, so you can get, I think, 10 French, 8 French, 12 French. I think you can get 14 and 16 French as well. Avery is still quite small, so the 12 French is what she had when she had her surgery, and we've just not needed to change it since. I don't know if she will need a bigger one as she gets older, but for now the 12 works fine. And the 1.5 centimeter is the length of the tube. When Avery had her surgery, I think she had surgery with a 1.7 centimeter. They do tend to put a little bit of a bigger one in just in case there is any swelling. Avery did suffer with quite a bit of granulation tissue, which once again I'll talk a little bit more about later, but we realised that she needed to go down a size, so we used the 1.5 centimetre, and so far it is working quite well. I will also need 2 Luer tip syringes, or actually I will probably just need 1 because I know that 1 comes in the G-tube pack. These are a different connection to the regular end-fit syringes that we normally use. These are the ones that connect to Avery's extension set, whereas these ones we put directly into the side of the button. So again, I will show you in a little bit more detail, or with a better view, so you can see what I'm talking about in just a little bit. But these ones we can put into the side of Avery's button, and it's how we empty the balloon that holds the button into her stomach, and this is also how we replace the water in her button. So even though we only change Avery's G-tube every few months, we do replace the water in the button every week or so, just to make sure that stays fresh and clean. So I'll need 1 of those, and there's already 1 in the packet, so 2 in total. I will need a end-fit syringe that attaches to her extension as well, because after I have placed the new G-tube and it's all in good position, I will aspirate it. Once again, I will show you what I mean in just a little bit. I will aspirate it and then test with pH strips. So this will test the pH of whatever substance that I bring out, and that will just confirm or deny to me whether the G-tube has gone into the right place. We don't need to do this all the time. When Avery had an NG tube, we used to have to aspirate every single time before we give her anything, because it is much more likely for an NG tube to move, because it's going down the nose. It does bypass the lungs. So there was always a risk that that tube could have moved and the end of the tube could have been sitting on her lungs. So we always had to check to make sure that tube was still in her stomach. For the G-tube, the only time we have to aspirate and check is when we replace it. So just to make sure that we have inserted it into the right place and it hasn't somehow managed to shift outside of the stomach. And that is pretty much everything that I will need, except Avery, of course. And here is my little model, still full of a cold, aren't you, Pudding? I'm just gonna lift her vest up completely, just to give me a little bit better access. Now, if you follow my channel, you guys know that I make Avery's vests and I put zips in them to give me easier access to Avery's G-tube, and if I was just changing the water or just changing the button cover or cleaning it, then I would just go through the zip. But for this, just because it's a little bit more work, oh dear, it's a little bit more work, I like to have nice easy access. So here is Avery's little button. It sits just above her belly button and slightly over to the left. That is not really a one size fits all. It all kind of just depends on where the stomach is situated. Don't bite your lip. Don't bite your lip. Avery has had a G-tube for almost 2 years now. She had her surgery, it'll be 2 years ago in April. So I'd like to say that Josh and I are fairly qualified in the G-tube and how to take care of it. And we have come across issues that we've had to troubleshoot in the past. I will probably sit a little bit later and share those experiences with you. What are you doing? But I think over the 2 years we've learned quite a lot. We've had a lot of different experiences, a few trials and things to figure out. But I think we are pretty comfortable with the G-tube now. So I am probably going to put the camera at a better angle for you to see and zoom right in on her G-tube so I can show you exactly what I'm doing. So just a word of warning, Avery will start to get a little bit fussy because I have turned the TV off for a minute, which she's not too happy about. So she's having a little bit of a moan and a groan. But to start with, I am just going to remove Avery's button cover. These come with poppers, so they're really easy to remove and put back on. And there is the button there, and her site is looking pretty clean. She has a bit of kind of excess scarring from when she had some granulation tissue, but her G-tube at the moment is in pretty good condition. So I will pop this button cover in the wash. We use like a little mesh laundry bag that keeps all of our button covers together, and we just put those through the washing machine, the tumble dryer, with everything else. So when you open up the packet the G-tube comes in, this is what you get. So you get some gauze, one Luer tip syringe, and this here is the actual G-tube. That is what it looks like when it is brand new. And just to double check, that is a 12 French 1.5 centimetre. So from my little sterile water bottle, I am going to draw up 2.5 centimetres 2.5 millilitres of water. That is how much Avery's G-tube balloon takes. Again, this isn't a one size fits all. I know that there are some that take more or less water, but this one takes 2.5 mil. And as a little reminder for us, not that you can see very well because this tube is old now, so it's rubbed off a bit, but it does say 2.5 mil on the edge here, which kind of reminds us, but I think it's kind of drilled in now. So with an empty Luer tip syringe to start with, I am going to place it into the balloon hole, and again, this is exactly how we would just replace the water. We'd suck out the old water and then we'd pop new in with our hand securely on the button so it doesn't come out. However, today I want to remove the button, so I'm going to pull on the syringe and draw all of that water out. And whoa, whoop. Okay, so Avery managed to catch my hand and actually pull out her own G-tube, which is a first. I will show you that properly in just a minute, but just to be quick, because a stomacite does start to close over very, very quickly, I am just going to lubricate. She keeps pushing me away. I'm going to lubricate the G-tube with some water. And as you can see, there is the stomacite. It looks nice and clean, but just while it's out, I'm just going to give that a quick clean over with my cotton pad. I'm going to close the G-tube up so that nothing comes out, and I am going to gently ease the new G-tube back in. It takes a little bit of pushing, but not much at all. And then with my clean 2.5 mil, I'm just going to pop that back in the hole at the side and push it back in, which will fill up the balloon. Just going to give it a really gentle tug just to make sure it's secure, which it is. And now I'm going to test the pH. So I'm going to just clamp the extension, and to put the extension on, you'll see there's a little black line. This black line matches up with this little kind of notch in the G-tube, so I just push it in. I use one hand, if Avery lets me, I use one hand just to hold it so it doesn't push onto her, and the other hand to push the extension. And then once it's in, I turn it clockwise, usually about 3/4 of the way around, and usually it will stop. You won't be able to push it any further, and that's locked in place. So with a 60 ml syringe, I am just going to aspirate, and all that means is I'm going to draw out some of her stomach contents, which you will see in just a second. There we go, and that is enough. I don't need much at all, I just need enough to test, and okay, that is gross. Luckily I have a little bit of gauze. So Avery has a cold, which is why her stomach contents were so stringy. Sorry, I hope none of you guys are eating. And then I'm going to take a pH strip, which looks like this, and then right in the middle, I'm just going to pop a little bit of that stomach contents and it will turn a different colour. So that colour I'd say is maybe between a 3 or a 4, which means it is in her stomach. That is acidic, which means it is in the right place. And something I forgot to fetch earlier, but I've just got a syringe full of some cool boiled water now, and all I'm going to do now is flush that stomach contents back through, and at the same time I am checking to make sure everything goes through the G-tube nice and smoothly, which it does. So that is all looking good. Now I'm going to hold the G-tube with one hand again and turn the extension set counterclockwise this time. You okay, Fred? Counterclockwise this time until the line and the little notch on the G-tube match up, and then with one hand supporting the G-tube I am just going to pull out the extension, and now we can pop on a fresh button cover and it's nice, new and clean. So I hope that footage turned out okay. I guess I will find out when I'm editing it back. One thing I will say is Avery did catch her own, like I think she caught my hand, and because my hand was firmly on the G-tube, she caught my hand and pulled, and she does have quite a bit of strength, and essentially pulled out her own G-tube. So I was a little bit taken aback, but it was fine. One thing I have noticed whenever we kind of have to troubleshoot issues with the G-tube is if you kind of stay calm, you are much more likely to be fine and everything will be fine than if you panic. So that really wasn't a big deal at all. I was going to pull the G-tube out anyway, but she just pulled it out a little bit more briskly than I would normally. So now that she's happy, and by the way, that process doesn't cause her any discomfort or pain whatsoever. You would have heard her whinging quite a bit. That was purely because I had turned the TV off. She just wanted the TV back on. But she was fine. It doesn't cause her any harm at all. It doesn't cause her any pain. And as a matter of fact, compared to what it was like when we had to change the NG tube, it is like night and day. But anyway, now that she is happy again, I thought I would just quickly show you what the G-tube looks like a little bit close up. Now it is a little bit grim because it has been inside her stomach for the last 3 or so months. If the camera will focus on it, there we go. So that is what it looks like. And as you can see, it is yellow at the bottom. That is just the kind of discoloration from her stomach and her stomach acids. But that little kind of yellow bit is actually the balloon. So trying to do this in a way where the camera will actually focus on it and not on my face. So if I use the water that I pulled out and push it back in, you will see that the balloon inflates. So that there is what it will actually look like when it is secure inside her stomach. So this balloon here is what holds it into her stomach, which is why we always carry things like stoma stoppers around with us, and we've also made sure there's some at the nursery, because obviously that there is a very, I mean, it's not delicate, but you know, it's more delicate than a plastic disc would be. It is a delicate balloon, and balloons can pop for whatever reason, but that is essentially what it is like on the inside of her stomach. So it doesn't take up too much room, and that is the 2.5 ml of water that keeps it in. So I will discard these things now. The G-tube button obviously can't be reused, that will go in the bin. The syringes that I've used will go in the wash. The Lure tip syringes I discard. These are single use from what Avery's community nurse told me. I know that's not the same for everywhere, so those things will go in the bin, and then the ENFit syringes we do reuse. So now that all that is done, Avery is probably starting to get a little bit hungry, so I am going to set her feed up, and then I will chat with you a little bit more while I'm feeding her. So when I attached Avery's extension set to her G-tube for checking her pH level, I left it empty and clamped it that way. Now the only difference between me attaching her extension set for changing her G-tube and attaching it for giving her a feed is I fill it up with water first, so I won't attach it empty, and that is purely because When you're like taking something out, it doesn't really matter so much, but if you're going to push something in, you don't want to push it in on an empty extension set, because what's in that empty extension set is air, and that air you will then just push straight into her stomach, which we don't want, because that can cause some nasty trapped wind, can't it, Pudding? So it always gets filled up. Usually I will prepare 2 60ml syringes for her flushes anyway, so I'll just use one of these syringes and push some water through the extension set before I attach it to her G-tube. One of the biggest things, well not biggest things, but one of the things that I used to forget to remember all of the time, and so many of us are guilty for it. Josh has done it, I've done it, I know that Avery's one-to-one has already done it, and it must be a common thing to forget, is to clamp and unclamp the extension. So anytime I detach a syringe from the extension, I have to remember to clamp it first. If you don't clamp it, what'll end up happening, especially if Avery starts to fuss, is she will push what is in her stomach out through the extension, and it will go everywhere. Now, it's happened before, and it's definitely one of those things where you kind of have to, it's one of these things that ends up working into your muscle memory, the clamping and unclamping, clamping and unclamping. And eventually it's kind of just like riding a bike, you do it without even thinking, which is kind of how it is for a lot of Avery stuff for me these days. But there was a time when I really had to think about it, and sometimes I would forget and I would end up covered in Avery's stomach contents, which isn't very pleasant. But it's definitely not the worst thing that could go wrong, which brings me to my next topic, is troubleshooting. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail on troubleshooting, just because when I first started my channel, I actually made a video, and it was kind of comparison and pros and cons with the G-tube versus the NG tube, and it was not long after Avery had her G-tube, and I talk about a lot of the kind of troubleshooting things that I'm going to bring up now in that video in a lot more detail. But I can talk now about the things that we actually have experienced, as opposed to kind of the risks of what could happen. So the main one obviously being the clamping and unclamping that I've already told you about. You can very well get yourself covered in not the nicest of substances. And speaking of troubleshooting, it looks like I'm going to have to do a little bit of that right now, because even though I had clamped Avery's extension set, for some reason she was still able to push out some of what was in there. So I've got water all over my legs. Now luckily I've just given her a massive flush, so it was just water, but she was pushing it out, which suggests to me that A, she's just incredibly strong and can push the contents past the clamp. B, there is something wrong with the extension set, in which case we can change the extension set and see if it still happens. Or C, there is something wrong with the G-tube, but we kind of need to eliminate A and B before we jump straight to C, because that's a bit of a bigger issue to fix, because we'd actually have to change the G-tube again. But this is what I mean by troubleshooting. A lot of the times things that happen, you can kind of figure out what's going on without panicking and rushing to hospital. So granulation tissue is definitely one of the things that we've had to deal with. It happened more so within the first year after Avery's G-tube surgery. And granulation tissue is basically like, it's almost like a build-up of scar tissue, and it kind of all sat around Avery's stoma site. It looked uncomfortable, it looked very swollen, it used to bleed sometimes, and sometimes it would swell and get irritated. What we did find back then is it was a good signal when Avery was getting poorly, because her stoma site, her granulation tissue, would always get more inflamed when she was getting a viral infection. And actually one of Avery's community nurses said sometimes it's a good giveaway, because sometimes the stoma site is the first place to look irritated when a viral infection's come in. I don't find that so much now, but when she had granulation tissue I did. And we battled granulation tissue for, like I said, the best part of a year. And in the end, because we tried all sorts, we tried steroid cream, and we tried like padded, I can't remember what they were called now. They were like absorbent pads. And what we actually found in the end that really got rid of it was using a cream with the pad on top and changing it once a day, and we just continued doing that every single day for months and months. Eventually it did go away. Now and again I will use, I think is it called Flaminol? It looks like a jelly. I will use that now and again, since we still have some, if I find that it's starting to look a little bit inflamed. But for the most part, her site looks pretty good, pretty clean, and the granulation tissue is pretty much gone. But I know that is something a lot of people struggle with. Avery's case was very mild. I've seen it much worse. But granulation tissue was one thing. We have never had to battle an infection on Avery's stoma site, luckily. I think we do a pretty good job at keeping it clean, and it's never got infected, so that's something we've never had to worry about. Something else we have run into, and this wasn't the last time we changed Avery's G-tube, but the time before that, and it was both Josh and I doing it, and everything was going fine. We had deflated the balloon, and for the life of us, neither me or Josh could get that G-tube out of her stomach. We're not sure what was causing it. It was, I can't remember if it was on a weekend or if it was maybe outside of business hours. So we couldn't get in touch with Avery's community nurses, which would be the first point of call. I did send a text, but we spent ages trying to get this G-tube out. In the end, Josh did a lot of fiddling with reinflating and deflating the balloon. What actually worked was he put the tiniest amount of water back into the balloon, and for some reason he was able to pull it out. What he thinks is when the balloon was completely sucked dry of all of its liquid, it turned into a bit of a funny shape, and that funny shape created too many notches so that we couldn't actually pull the G-tube out. Once he had put a tiny bit of water back in, it kind of smoothed the shape out a little bit so that we could pull it out, if that makes sense. So we did manage to solve it in the end, but it's these little things. A blocked G-tube is definitely another troubleshoot that we've had. I think the very first time Josh and I ended up changing Avery's G-tube alone was because of a blocked G-tube, and that was when she was on the blended diet, and I'm pretty sure it's raspberry seeds that did it. There are some methods that you can use to try and unblock a G-tube before you have to resort to changing it. Apparently warm water, sparkling water can be a good one as well. Apparently trying to pull back on the G-tubes, try and suck whatever's inside out is another way. We tried it all, obviously, but still couldn't get the tube unblocked, so we did end up having to change it. But it's just little things like that. Most of the time it's stuff that is easily solved. At very worst, you know, we'd need a community nurse out or have to take her to PODDLER'S to help. When Avery first had her surgery, because they put 3 stitches in a triangle formation around the G-tube, Avery managed to pop one of those stitches before they were due to come out, so we had to take her into PODDLER'S for that. It wasn't any cause for concern, really. They said the 2 stitches will be fine until it all heals, and it was all fine. Obviously the more dramatic issues would be where there's a case of the G-tube falling out and then you're not realizing it's fallen out until it's already closed over. For us, that would mean probably a trip back to the Children's Hospital in Bristol, because she'd need to have the surgery to have it reinserted, because the stoma site for a G-tube can close up very quickly. Apparently it can be as fast as 20 minutes. So that is something that we always try and look out for. Luckily, touch wood, it hasn't happened yet, but we do always carry stoma stoppers, which look like little the little things you put in the ground, then you put a golf ball on top. No idea what they're called, I'm not a golfer, but that is what they look like. It's just a little spike with a little bit of a disc on the end, and essentially you just put that into the hole and it stops it from closing up. It looks a little bit like a piercing, like a stretcher. But that hasn't happened. Hopefully it will not, and I think we've gotten pretty good at kind of troubleshooting Avery's G-tube now and figuring out what's going on and how we can fix it. We try to do as much at home as we possibly can, especially if it's on a weekend or outside of business hours, because that would mean a trip to hospital. So we do always try and see if we can troubleshoot ourselves, you know, within reason. We're not doctors, we're not going to do something that's going to cause any risk to Avery's safety, but there are some things that are just common sense, really. I hope this video was helpful for some of you. I thought it would be a nice little resource again here on my channel. I do like to do kind of little videos here and there that are more informative, just to have as resources here. I talk a lot about our day-to-day, and I vlog our kind of daily lives and what we get up to and whatnot. But ultimately, you know, I started this channel because I'm sharing our journey as a family with a little one with complex medical needs. So I think it is nice to have some more informative videos on my channel, just to see the more kind of formal side of things, if you will. So with that said, I'm gonna leave it here, and I will catch up with you in the next video, which will probably just be a normal spend some time with us kind of vlog. So I will see you guys in a few days with another video. Bye guys.